despite what may be going on around us, whatever chaos or problems or hardships might be occurring in our life, we always have the choice to choose how we show up, what frequency we bring, and we do have power over the outcomes that we experience.
Welcome to An Entrepreneur's Vibes, the podcast that gives insight into the minds of visionary entrepreneurs and business leaders. Brought to you by The Right Direction, a leading professional and technical writing company based in North America. Each episode, we explore the stories and experiences of those who dared to dream, took the leap, and built their own empires. Join us in uncovering the secrets to success and lessons learned along the way. So if you're just starting out your entrepreneurial journey or you're already a seasoned business pro, you'll find inspiration, knowledge, and good vibes right here. Today's guest is someone whose journey is as deeply spiritual as it is inspiring. Our guest is the founder of the Purifying Place, a sacred space dedicated to healing, soul alignment, and spiritual awakening. Our guest is a spiritual healer, teacher, and soul alignment coach who was called to this work through a profound personal transformation. From mastering Oracle Reiki to incorporating sound healing, human design, and breathwork, our guest has built a business that helps others reconnect with themselves and the divine within. Today, she's here to share how she turned spiritual calling into an entrepreneurial mission. And today, how the Purifying Place is helping others find clarity, peace, and purpose. Get ready to dive deep into healing, entrepreneurship, and the power of trusting your intuition. Welcome to the show, Rosaly Didonna.
Thank you, Patricia. Thank
Hi,
you.
Rosaly. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for that great introduction.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited for our conversation. And I wanted to start by, can you take us back to the moment you first received the name The Purifying Place during your Akashic reading? What did that feel like?
Yeah, so I was training in Reiki. It was second Reiki 2, second class, and our teacher led us into the Akashic records to kind of gain clarity or answers to our questions that we might have had. And I was going through Reiki really for my own healing and my own peace. So when I went in, my question really was, what do I do with all this information that I'm learning? So because I had just been guided to, on this journey of healing and awakening and just gaining this deeper wisdom, I thought, well, if I'm obtaining all this knowledge and these experiences, what am I meant to do with all of this? Because my teacher at the time would always tell us, like, you guys are going to start businesses, you're going to be doing this. And I never really saw myself doing that. But once I entered the Akashic Records, I had this very frantic energy that was really reflective of how I felt in that time of my life, where, and a lot of people can resonate this, where you feel anxious, unsure, you don't feel aligned about where you're going, but there's something more. And you feel like you need the answers because our mind just loves knowing what's next. And it was really just an opening for me to realize that I need to be more comfortable with the unknown and what that feels like. But what happened was, my question came through. I asked, what am I meant to do with this? And I I saw two light beings come down. Um, they just look like pulsing energy and light. And they both tapped me on opposite sides of my shoulders. And I felt the most deepest peace that I had ever felt in my life, where I truly feel like it was just oneness, unconditional love, and that frazzled energy quickly dissipated. And they told me that I would start a business called the Purifying Place, to help people and guide them through their own healing journey, just like traversed my own. I would help guide people along theirs.
And for our listeners out there who might not understand or know what an Akashic reading is, could you tell us a little more about that and what the process looks like?
Yeah. Yeah, so we just, our my teacher at the time just dropped this in. It's really this place where holds all that is, and it has records of all your timelines, all the things that happen, and you can call into, what you're searching for, and it'll bring up to you what that, either in, words or symbols, or other people experienced different things. But for me, and going to the Akashic readings other times with other people, weren't nearly that powerful. But for some reason, that first one just really like broke me open. And, coming out of it, I was like crying. It was a lot of energy that I was feeling. And, early on in training in Reiki, I was still kind of a skeptic. Like, is this really working? Does this really help people? But just through my own, experience of it, and now like helping others, I see like this stuff really does work.
Hmm. And could you tell us what was the inspiration behind you turning your deeply personal spiritual journey into a public offering for others and helping others?
Yeah, it really was a calling. It is a calling because, you know, experiencing my daughter's birth at 23 weeks, at 1.5 pounds, at the beginning of the pandemic, was really a jarring experience. It was a very traumatic experience. But what guided me through that, like God spoke to me after I had to leave my daughter in the hospital. I was spiraling down into a really quick and deep depression. I know it would go that route very soon, but something sparked in me. I heard a voice in the middle of the night, the same night that I had to leave her in the hospital, that told me Lily will rise from this, just like her name says, Lily Rose, because that's the name that we had chosen months, years before she was born. And it again, I felt that unwavering peace and sensation of that everything would be okay. And it was something my mind couldn't explain. But at the same time, going through something that hard, I thought, what do I have to lose? And I gained the knowing that I had to give this my all. And that process was really a way to show me that despite what may be going on around us, whatever chaos or problems or hardships might be occurring in our life, we always have the choice to choose how we show up, what frequency we bring, and we do have power over the outcomes that we experience.
I definitely believe that the power of the mind really is, I think, something that we don't know how to use yet, like how much our thoughts like really shape our environment. And it's amazing that you brought up your daughter's birth, because I did want to ask you, like, how did that experience, you think, shaped who you are as a healer and a teacher?
Yeah, I think, it really broke me down to the point where, because I'm naturally a nurturing person. Like I'm an elementary school teacher. I love helping others. I've had this value of service for a long time, but in this capacity, I feel like experiencing that to a point where you feel like all hope is lost, and it's like a near death experience, almost like someone dies or you die or something tragic happens. But what I realize is we're holding on to so much of what we want to control in our life that we don't allow the divine to come through and guide us and help us into the most fruitful experience that we desire. And so I really think God had to do this to me in a way to let me let go so that then I can surrender and have the guidance and the assistance into manifesting what was coming next. And in that process, I really, what happens in our hardships is we gain this really close connection with God, with the divine, or with the universe, whatever source, whatever you want to call it. And we come out of those hardships not seeing God as this outside thing outside of us anymore. You gain this relationship and you understand, what he sounds like, or what the messages are, the symbols, and it's just again piecing along those things along your journey, and it's different for everyone. So coming out of that, through the whole process, I thought, God, if Lily really does rise from this, like you say, I will be a full believer. I will not, obviously we have doubts, but I will continue to stay the track and this path because she did. She overcame so many different things that the doctors say she would. Like, first of all, they said you have the option to abort because less than 30% chance she'll survive anyway. And if she does, she'll leave this place with, at least one, more likely two or more very severe disabilities. And that's leaving if she makes it. But throughout the process of, resuscitating her, because they had to do that because they had to intubate her because she couldn't breathe, and the brain bleeds and the blindness, and all the things that they say that could go wrong, but still holding on to that faith, and that that phrase that Lily will rise from this, just like her name says, became my mantra and my anchor to anchor into the frequency of love, of gratitude, of having faith in something that I hadn't seen, and the outcome that I didn't see yet. So while she was in the hospital, I really read up on like Joe Dispenza's work and Bruce Lipton because I had already been kind of reading and studying their work, but once she was in the hospital, I really, because they talk about full trans, like people just completely healing and all this miraculous stuff that happens. So I really, followed what they were talking about, and I do really feel like it helped. And intuitively, I didn't realize it then, but I was channeling Reiki to her as well. I mean, I wasn't trained in Reiki, but I was putting my hands on her. I was holding the intention to, have her. I went into the hospital, like telling my husband, like, only go in a, in this type of energetic state. And I feel like all of it just helped transform the situation and reach the outcome that we all desired. And some people say, oh, well, that was just luck, or it was just by chance, or I don't know. Can we explain it? There's so much science now that people are studying and putting together to prove that, yes, we do have an effect on these outcomes, on manifesting these outcomes. But I just hold on to the faith and the experience that I had. And I'm just here to share it with people who want to hear.
That's amazing. I feel like that was such a powerful and miraculous experience. And honestly, like that's amazing for you and your family. I'm so happy that Lily Rose is like thriving and happy and healthy. And I wanted to ask you, since earlier you did say that it was like a calling for you to start the Purifying Place. I wanted to ask you, like, how did you navigate the vulnerability of starting a business that is rooted in such personal and sacred experiences?
That's interesting because I've always struggled like sharing myself emotionally and being vulnerable. And, I was already on that journey of trying to open up more and be more vulnerable and be more intentional. And what I've noticed, at least in patterns, is when you become more intentional and you have this, desire or outcome, the universe or God or source, puts this in something in your path that people say tests, but I really feel like it's an opportunity to deepen that what you say you're going to do. So if I was already on the path of being more vulnerable and opening myself emotionally and healing parts of me that I knew needed to be healed. So I feel like this was just another thing on my path that helped me do that at a deeper level because after Lily got out of the hospital, I was still experiencing a lot of, some people might call it post-traumatic stress, but I was experiencing a lot of, like flashbacks and anxiety and maybe like a little depression too, like my therapist said. But it was just a lot for my nervous system to handle. And I didn't realize at the time that's what was happening. And I was so outwardly focused on, well, what would happen to her and constantly focused on her. But the wake up call was really, what we judge and perceive of people in our outside world is really a reflection of what's going on within. So when I looked within, I realized it wasn't that I was scared something bad was gonna happen to her, or that all because of all the things that she endured. It was really a wake up call to look within and see what's still not healed within me. Because here I was witnessing this very miraculous healing experience outside of me that was then a reflection to then accept that I needed to do that for myself.
Mhm.
And I, gained the courage to share that because I know what it felt like to experience God so profoundly in that experience. And God has really told me, like, you're meant to share the story, you're meant to share it. And that's like a huge responsibility that you feel. And I've accepted the calling. I really, truly believe I wouldn't be able to live with myself if I felt that and heard God telling me that and didn't take action on it. And I do realize, like, there's so many people, we all have our own callings, and it takes a lot of courage to then accept it and take the actions to walk that path because it's not easy. There's people who might, situations and things that might happen that transform you, but also your old life dissolves or you have to let it go. And it's just been a process. So I'm still on it and it's going well, but it's definitely like opened up just even more opportunities and modes of expansion in my life.
Mhm. I think that's like really fascinating because I do believe that they say, it's going to cost you your old life if you want to venture into something new, if you want to become a new person, almost like it's going to cost you your old life. And maybe that was like something that you've experienced as well. You were talking about how hard it is, right? And how vulnerable it can be to share this story. And I wanted to ask you, like, besides that, besides the opening up, the vulnerability, and being scared to share your story, what were the other challenges you faced when you were launching the Purifying Place?
For me, one of the biggest things was just visibility. Like
Mm,
you said, showing up and getting in front of people and telling them my story. And, I was already sharing my story with people who would ask or
mhm,
at church and things like that. But once it started becoming like, oh, I'm going to create a business, it was a lot of imposter syndrome too. Like, who am I to do this? Like, you've never started a business, all the things. And again, it was another way for me to deepen my personal connection with God because when you anchor into that truth of who you are as one with God, as one with all that is, the outside validation isn't necessary anymore. The outside noise isn't as loud as anymore because you're rooted in who you truly are. So I really feel like starting my business and doing the things was really another way for me to learn. Okay, you know God so fully now. You had that experience, but now you walk the walk. So will
mhm,
you really say what you say when people are questioning you?
mhm,
When people, don't like that you're speaking up, walking that path. And I have that full faith that yes, I am being supported. I'm always supported. I am fully loved. I'm moving from a place of wholeness now, as opposed to before, I was constantly a victim. I was constantly looking for outside validation or input to make me feel whole again. When, I tell my clients this and everybody, it's like, we are already whole.
mhm,
And part of what the work that I do is helping people decondition and recognize that a lot of our beliefs about who we are handed down to us, are scripted to us, are put into us based on our upbringing, based on what people have told us about us, based on how our parents treated us, all the things. And when we can strip away all of that, who are you really? And when you can really connect with that on a deeper level, you gain this unshakable confidence that you can do anything,
mhm,
right? So you're not constantly outsourcing your energy. It's you're being filled within. You're being filled with spirit, with God, with joy, with love, and that is what gives you the energy to move, to share and to express what your heart and your soul is really wanting to express.
mhm. I love that when you said having that unshakable confidence comes from within, because a lot of the times I do believe that, like you said, there's a lot of conditioning that we've been taught very early on that we have to unlearn in order to find the things that we really are passionate about. And I think not just for spiritual journeys, a lot of entrepreneurs I feel like can really relate to that, where they have imposter syndrome or where they're looking for outside validation or they're afraid to start a business because what people say, like, so I think a lot of people will really relate to that. I wanted to ask you, so you've overcome the part where you're vulnerable and you've come to say that, okay, I'm going to walk this walk, I'm going to answer this calling. So, how did you then approach building a client base for a service that is so energetically personal and spiritual?
Yeah. So after I learned Reiki, it's interesting. Reiki is very, you're dealing with a lot of energy. Yes, things are being cleared. Yes, you feel lighter, but I really felt the lack of grounding in that modality. And I thought, okay, again, with the question, I have all these experiences, these revelations. I feel lighter. I feel, clearer, but something still is missing. And what was missing, I feel like, was really actionable steps in this physical world, in this physical realm, because you can have all these experiences in your subconscious and
Mm,
with the divine. And well, what does it mean if it's not translated into this human experience because we're human. So I really felt called to then learn how to do spiritual life coaching. And that really just anchored in because part of it is, yes, accessing that wisdom of who you are at a soul level, but then what do you do with it? How do you, again, the second part is walking that path of who you say you truly are and what you truly believe. Are you going to walk that path then? And what does that path look like? And for me, it was learning how to coach because I really saw the need for people who are, getting energy healing or Reiki healing or whatever it is. You kind of, some practitioners, they do the healing and then they send you off on your way. And it's like,
Mhm.
experiencing that, it's like, well, I don't feel anchored. I don't feel grounded. I feel kind of even more confused, if
Mhm.
anything, because there's no answers. And I feel like pairing it with the coaching is like helping people realize that your transmissions or your guidance from the divine, from your intuition, from God, has a purpose and a reason. And how can you then translate that into your life? And that's really what people are looking for. Because when people come and clients come, they want a certain outcome. They want a certain goal to reach, whether it's a relationship or more money or starting a business. And there's something keeping them, blocking them from reaching it. So what I really help my clients do is strip away all the things that they are not, recognize who they are at a soul level and connect with that and allow that to guide them, into taking actions that are true and authentic to them.
Mhm.
And that's really it. I just, I started with one-to-one Reiki, but then after learning coaching for myself, again, it was something that I just did for my own benefit that I saw that I needed. And then I worked that into a full program because it's really the framework that I came up with is really what the transformation and process that I went through myself that has led me to, starting this business, now writing a book and speaking on podcasts and doing all the things that I never thought that I would do in such a short amount of time. And seeing how much it's helped me, it felt natural to want to share it with people.
Mhm. And were you finding your first clients like through your community? How were you like marketing the business as it was
Yeah.
starting?
Yeah, so I really, my teacher at the time, my Reiki teacher, who was also like a spiritual mentor, a business mentor, she said, get your website up and do all these things. So I did get a website up. I started with that. Mostly it was friends or people that I had met. Like, I had my very first client just talking to someone about my Reiki experience at my spiritual life coaching school. And she was like, I want to learn how to do Reiki. And boom, it was like already my first client. And that was not trying to sell anything. It was just, being who I am and sharing something that helped me. But from there, I put my business on Yelp and then I did Google, business Google profile. And then I start, okay, well, how else do I meet people? And I would go on Meetup a lot. So I started posting on Meetup and now I have a big group there who attend my sound baths every month. And it's just been a natural like unfolding. And
Mhm.
then not my coach, but the woman who started this coaching school that I attended reached out to me and said, I think you'd be a really good fit for this network, this community. And so I became a branch director for that community. And it's just been a natural unfolding
Mhm.
and meeting so many new people and then showing up on Instagram, sharing my message. I've just made so many new connections and clients and friends that way. Now I'm on YouTube. So it's just been a journey and I
Mhm.
feel like I've been meeting so many new people. So for people who are just starting, like I was, again, I had that like fear of, oh my gosh, who's going to want this or who's going to find me? And there's so many people out there who want what you have. So, you know, again, I understand people are experiencing the imposter syndrome and the fear, but when you can do that inner work and recognize who you truly are and recognize that you have soul gifts that you're meant to share, that only you can share, that people are looking for, you really feel called to do this service because it becomes this a duty, almost like I have to
Mhm.
do this.
Yeah, it's amazing that you've been able to find your community. It's almost it's true. I like to believe that the universe will really conspire to bring you what you believe is supposed to be yours. And I think, you wouldn't have been called to do this if there were not people who needed it. So I think it's like really amazing how you've been able to find this network of people who do need you. And, I wanted to ask, like, what would you say was like the first service offering that you were able to give your client? And how would you say has that first offering evolved throughout the years into the range of services that you now offer?
So the very first thing I offered was just one-to-one Reiki services. But then that again, it's funny, like people will ask you, well, can you do this? Like when that woman asked me to train her in Reiki, I, I I didn't even post that I taught people, but there, she's just like, I just now have to, I want to learn from you. So human design readings are another thing that people want. Like I get a lot of clients who want human design readings because, there's a lot people say, oh, that's woo-woo because it's channeled things, but the information is really based on astrology and Kala and I Ching and a lot of different ancient wisdom. But what I see human design doing is it helps people recognize like how to use their energy, what is the most effortless way for them to use their energy and apply it to how they're operating in their life or their business. And a lot of the times people are already operating based on trial and error in their own life, so the human design reading just validates and reflects that back to them so that they, and then it gives them some fine tweaks about, okay, what can I do differently moving forward? But that's another offering that I think people just love because it helps them recognize who they are energetically and how to use their energy in a more easy, effortless way that's going to help them accomplish what they want. And, the next thing is my coaching offer, the, 3 month, 6 month package where we just really dig deep and again, let go of those subconscious limiting beliefs, reprogram those, and start living in alignment with your truth, with your soul.
We might have some listeners today who would want to start their spiritual journeys but don't know where to start. Could you tell us like a little bit more like about the basics of Reiki and human design and what can people expect from like a one-to-one meeting with you if they wanted to do
Yeah.
Reiki or if they wanted to do human design? What would that entail?
Yeah, for Reiki, you come in, I ask the client, like, is there something that you want to focus on, or what are you experiencing that you need help with? And Reiki is awesome. Like, you lie down, you experience this deep, restful relaxation, and that drops you into a state of receiving and where insights and intuition and things like that will come up, but also that helps the healing happen. So I'm holding the space for you to receive that. And intuitively, things come up for me too that I then share afterwards with the client. But, we do a full body scan of your energetic body, of your chakras to see where the blockages and the energy might be stuck and not running smoothly. And for me, sometimes, messages come up or visions or colors, whatever it might be, sensations that we then can debrief and talk about afterwards. And it's eerily always on point. Like people will say, "Oh my gosh." Like one time I told a woman like I saw a horse, like you were riding a horse, and she was like, that's funny because I love working with horses. And she was talking about wanting to be free. And there's just a lot of symbolism and things that come through intuitively because you're no longer in that mental plane. You're accessing, the subconscious deep within. So things might come up and that's what helps the emotional release, the clearing that people are seeking in a safe place. And then the human design is, we're not like lying down and do anything, but it's similar to astrology. Like we use the location of your birth time, your birth date, and
Your birth chart, essentially, yeah.
yeah, and it comes up with this body graph and it has these gates and all these so much information that I then again ask the client, well, what are you wanting? Like, what are you searching for? What are you wanting to gain more clarity on? And I really do a lot of research into their body graph and then present it to them and guide them and show them like their chart. So that's a
Mhm.
very informational session.
Hmm. And to my understanding, this is a very energetic session. And it's like when you are with a client, you get like these downloads, right? Where you're able to understand them a bit better. I wanted to ask, like, how do you maintain that energetic boundary? Because you might be managing or talking to a lot of different clients?
Yeah. So we definitely at the beginning and at the end of each session, we have certain things that we do and energetic clearings for myself. And I feel like that, grounded on earth, but also receiving that flow of energy from God, from source, is what's kept me pure. Is
Mm-hmm.
what's kept me not bogged down with everybody's energy. And when you start working with energy, I feel like you really gain the discernment of what is yours and what is not. Before this work, my human design is 6-2 projector, and I'm very like sensitive to the environment.
Mm-hmm.
So unknowingly, I was absorbing so much energy my whole life and feeling energy and thinking it was mine and feeling all the things, and it was no wonder I was anxious and low energy and all the things I was experiencing. So learning Reiki was really an access to something that nobody could ever explain to me before about what I was feeling energetically. And that has really amplified my gifts because now I can recognize feeling everyone's energy and the energy around me is not a curse, because it felt like a curse for so long,
Mm-hmm.
and it just felt like a drag, and like, why can't I be normal? But now I've gained the tools and the clarity to know how to use it in a purposeful way where people now pay me to tune in to
Mm-hmm.
help them with their energy. And I'm realizing now some of our biggest pitfalls or curses or things we think are annoying to us become our greatest gifts, our
Mm-hmm.
biggest gifts. So
That's beautiful. It's like, yeah, like I wanted to say, like, it's like empathy is like your superpower and like being able to, and it's great that you now have the power of discernment to be able to say, okay, this is not my energy. This is something I might be picking up from someone else. And then it's amazing that you've created like this community where you are helping people. So I think that's like a beautiful calling truly to walk this life and be able to do that for other people. What advice would you give to someone who might want to start a spiritually focused business, but they don't know where to begin?
that's interesting because I do have clients who come in and they're like, I want to do what you're doing. And it's interesting because being someone who didn't intend to start a business first,
Mm,
I would tell people to really focus on your own inner healing, because you could see someone outside of you and think, I want to do what they're doing. But then that's not authentic to you. We cannot just then take that character and wear it like, a costume like in a video game. It's so I would really challenge someone to look within and work through their own inner healing and gain the access that they have to their own inner wisdom to know what they truly want,
mm,
because most people don't even know what they desire. Most people think they desire something, but it's a desire that's been placed onto them, not by God, by source, but by humans or
mm,
experiences or expectations from society. And so then the starting point, I think, for a lot of people is how do you then clear that noise away so that you can then truly receive what your true desires are and then live them. And people might be getting desires already from, because there's things in our heart that only we know about
mm,
that we feel called to do. But part of that is also accepting what they are. Some people might be receiving gifts and callings about what they're meant to do, but they reject them because
mm,
they're scared. They're living from a place of fear that I couldn't do that, or that's not good enough, or all the limiting beliefs that we have. So I would really, again, start on that inner work, start on yourself,
mm,
and let that way of being guide you into what your next step is,
mm.
because it might not always be what you think it is.
Hmm. I can definitely understand that, like when some people see someone else in a career or doing something that they want to do, but then they haven't lived that person's experiences, like with what happened to you. Like you had a very unique spiritual and miraculous experience, and that led you to this path. And a lot of people may not get that. Everyone's path is unique. So I think that's like really great advice that you have to like start from within and like really take away all of like those humanly desires, like those things that like we said earlier, the conditionings we've maybe gotten from as children, or like the things that, you know, we have to unlearn to find, our true path. So I think that's like really great advice. And I wanted to ask, how do you balance the business side of the purifying place with its intuitive flow and like the healing work? How do you balance that?
Yeah, that's so interesting because, being someone who's never started a business before, doesn't know anyone who started a business, but it's interesting because there are business type things that I've had to learn.
Mhm.
And now that I'm part of this network and this community who has a lot of things to offer, I have been learning things. And I really feel like they go together because I let my intuition, my soul, my wisdom, my inner wisdom, God guide me to what I'm meant to do next. I know again, this is when your inner work plays a part because you won't be able to discern what the next step, right step is for you if you're constantly muddied within yourself and you're still operating from outward expectations and ways of being. So now I tune into my energy and feel, am I operating from a place of wholeness when I choose to take this next step? And does this feel aligned with what I need to do next? Because in actuality, everything is the right step. It's just, is that step going to lead you to what you want to experience in this human experience? Or is it gonna lead you on this long, terrible, chaotic journey? But eventually still we're all gonna return to the same place, which is source, right? We're all part of one that is. And so I really let myself clear my mind and feel into what is the next step for me. And honestly, for me too, I'm just one of my like gifts is just I just know when I'm meant to do something. And people might think that's impulsive or that's silly. Like I just like for example, I really wanted to have my own studio, like in-person studio, because I felt the calling like we need to be in person with people, not just online. And I thought it was guiding me to, yes, find a studio. And I thought it was going to happen. But again, when you make that decision, and if it's aligned, the universe is going to help you find where you're meant to be. And sure enough, not even a few weeks later, I found a studio within, what I was looking for nearby. And now I do my sound baths there. So yeah.
Mm. That's amazing. I mean, it's amazing that you just have that gift of intuition, I guess. And congratulations on the new studio. With that said, I wanted to ask, has that been the most transformative business decision you've made so far? Has there been anything else that's been transformative for the business side specifically?
I feel like the thing that is coming up for me is the decision to go all in on your dreams. That has been the most transformational decision in my business because, again, when we receive the knowing of what our desire is placed in our hearts by God, by us, and we accept it, when we truly accept it, not, oh, I'm going to keep one foot out the door and maybe, okay. And then, pay attention to your language too. How are you talking about your business? How are you showing up in your business? And a lot of the time, our language will reveal to us how we truly feel inside. If we're doubtful, if we think it's not going to work, and that translates then into our clients' experience, into our own experience. And it doesn't work. So, if you know you're meant to do this 100%, it's your calling, it's what you're meant to do, then choose to go all in 100%, 110%, and give it all that you've got. I feel like that is like the thing because and you can only get there, I feel like, until you've worked on yourself internally. That's why the inner wisdom, the inner work comes first, because you will never allow yourself to go 100% on something if you've not worked on the things that are holding you back inside.
Mhm. That's so true. There is such power in words. I do believe that as well. Like sometimes even if you think you don't believe that, like you will just like it's kind of like word vomit, like how you truly feel will come out and the things you say. And that's why I think when you start a business venture or have any goal set in your mind, like you really have to go all in. Otherwise, how else will anything or anyone outside of you help you? achieve that, you know,
Mhm.
if you don't first believe in yourself. So I think that's like really powerful advice. And I totally believe in that. I wanted to talk about like a challenge that you may have faced. Have you faced any skepticism or a misunderstanding around your work? And if so, how were you able to handle it?
Yeah, gosh, that's interesting. It's interesting because you hear people say, "Oh, that's woo-woo," or energy healing. Like that sounds or people that's part of a cult, or I've heard everything. I've heard it all.
Mhm.
And I think how I've been able to navigate it is to root myself truly in who I am and know who I truly am. Because again, and this is why this work is so foundational. When you can access that point of view that's infinite, that is truly powerful and all and creative and unconditional within you, all the things outside, yes, it might, I'm not going to say it never like makes me second guess or feel hurt or whatever it is, but it just becomes noise that then falls away. It doesn't anchor itself into your heart anymore. Because if those outside opinions are still holding weight within you, which they might, then that's just an opportunity and an invitation then to look inside and say, where am I still needing to see something that needs to be brought to my awareness that needs to then be transformed or integrated into who I truly am in this moment? Because you might know, you know, mentally like, no, that's not true about who I am. But the fact that you have this emotional reaction to it gives you the opportunity then to look inside and see, there is still something there that maybe I need to look at, that I need to process, that I need to release, that I can then deepen into the truth of who I am. Because sometimes people see that those outwardly opinions as, reasons to give up. But it's like, how can you then take those opinions then? And if you do have a reaction towards them, again, use it as fuel, as fertilizer to your growth,
Mhm.
because that's really what it is. Because now that I'm walking this path, I know, there's so many things that come up where God is showing me, like, hey, this came up. This is now an opportunity to choose this or that. And if you really say what you say you're going to do, well, here's the opportunity now. Now here, do it. And once you do it, you then embody that person of who you're becoming.
Mhm.
So an example for this for me was discerning, who do I really want to work with in my business? Because at the beginning, there were so many people who wanted to, collaborations and all these things. And I was just accepting everybody. And then I realized, well, why am I doing that? Instead of placing the blame on, this, I looked within and thought, well, what is making me continue to do that? And once I could heal that, then I become a more deeply embodied, empowered person to then choose what's right for me the next time.
Hmm. I feel like a lot of business owners will relate to that, whether they're not like spiritual healers as well. There's always going to be skeptics. There's always going to be people who will criticize your product or your service, but then that's only going to make you, really find your community. Like you said, not accepting everyone. You're going to have a target market. You're going to have a community, an audience that is for you, and that's only going to strengthen, your own services and your own products. And I think that's like really great it's a really great lesson for anyone who's, starting their own business that, not everyone is going to be supportive. A lot of people are going to say a lot of different things, but if you know the work you're doing is good, then that should speak for itself, right?
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit more about your other services, but first, could you actually tell us the difference between Oracle Reiki and traditional Reiki?
Yeah. So Oracle Reiki it's still Reiki. My teacher, Queenie Hilfer, she just, kind of created her own version of Reiki that is multidimensional, that has,
Mm.
the way that she taught Reiki to us. So it's the same, but she's really taught us to not just, when you're going into a Reiki session, I'm just channeling Reiki. Like that's not the case most of the time. Is There's multiple things that are going on. So I think she, you know, use that phrase to kind of highlight the kind of, class or teaching that she likes to do. But it's really a way to use all of our gifts because, again, like you said, we do receive guidance intuitively or downloads or see things. And I think what I'm not going to speak for Queenie, but what I learned from her and what I also practice too is that we're not the oracles. We're not telling you. You're also receiving them yourself. So we hold the space for you then to not always place your power outside of you and expect someone to have the message that you're looking for. Because yes, we do that in a session, but we also hold the space for you to access whatever you're meant to receive too. Because the truth is, we're all intuitive. We all are receiving guidance. And some of us are just paying more attention than others.
Mm-hmm.
And some of us have more clear channels than others. Some of us are not bogged down by all this stuff that we've experienced and labels that we're holding onto and others. So it's really then our responsibility then if this is something that you seek, it's like a muscle to work it and to practice it and as any skill, practice it again and again because it's not going to look the same for everybody. And that's what I encourage all my clients to do is to empower themselves so that yes, it's nice to come together with a group and share things, but you also want to feel your own empowerment within you because this is something I see in the spiritual community a lot is people are wanting to hear what everyone else is thinking and then it just becomes like this group thing like okay yeah they thought that so I agree and I just I encourage my students because I'm a teacher as well to do the same thing question and come up with your own answers and your own research and spiritually your own research is tuning into your own wisdom tuning into your own channel to your own experience instead of taking what everybody else has said as the truth.
Mhm. I wanted to also touch base on sound healing. You were talking about your new studio. Could you tell us more about sound healing and breathwork and what that entails?
Yeah. So, sound healing. Oh, I love sound healing. It's just, I feel like a lot of people are gravitating towards sound healing because it's, again, people can identify with sound,
Mm-hmm.
people love music, and people want to heal. So they're like, oh, I just come in, I lie down, listen to beautiful sounds, and somehow that helps me. Okay, sign me up. Like it's just a very easy entry point. But yeah, the sound bowls when we play them they help, with the frequency to align yourself energetically. I have clients that come every month and they're not in the spiritual realm or the spiritual community very much, but they're like, you know what? I really feel like this is helping me because this happened and that. And because again, you're getting into that deep relaxation and certain things are coming up energetically and emotionally that may need to be released. So, and the breath just also helps direct that. I'm not a breathwork facilitator, but we do incorporate some, guided meditation and breathing, but it's powerful. I've done my own breathwork classes too, like experiencing it, and it's really powerful. Like
Mhm.
so I would highly encourage people to try it. I had a facilitator guide me through one, and again, it just feels like this full release because we're holding on to things physically, energetically, like all the things. And if we've never tried something and released it, we wouldn't even know the difference. But
Mhm.
after experiencing something like that, you'll really see, like, whoa, I didn't realize I was holding on to so much.
I am such a big believer in that. I've only ever tried a sound bath once, and it was like an hour long. We were just like laying down and listening to the sounds and the bowls and the frequency. I really believe in like the power of frequencies. I can't tell you the science behind it, but I definitely feel a lot lighter. Sometimes when I listen to certain frequencies, it can help me focus. It can help me, do whatever it is that I need to do at that moment in time. So I'm such a big believer in that. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. There was a scientific experiment they did on like two plants where one plant was just listening to like good things and the other plant was listening to bad things and the plant that was listening to the bad frequencies like died. So I think there's like power in like sounds and like the unconscious. So I'm such a big believer in that. I would love to experience it again. But when your clients come to you, do they know what modality they want to use, or is it intuitively guided on your side?
So when people come and find me, like for a lot of entry points for me are my sound baths or people want human design readings,
Mm.
or they've found me, some other way. So usually those are the two things that people are coming in for. And then they like, oh, you also do coaching or you also do this. And it just kind of is a natural progression because they all go together and help with the same thing. People will ask me like, well, what do you do? And I kind of explain to them and then they kind of choose like, oh, I really am interested in that. Like I had a woman who came in for my sound bath and she just loved it so much, no experience in it. And, at the beginning of each one, I just share a little bit about what I do. And she heard me mention human design and that kind of like piqued her interest because people are searching for answers and they want help in finding those. And I feel like I'm just giving them the services and the things that I offer that helps me that could also help them, that I know will help them as well gain that clarity of what is coming.
You've been open with speaking about connecting to the divine or your higher self or source. How can someone begin to build that connection within themselves?
I would just start being open to receive because it's interesting. I had this conversation with another spiritual life coach just the other day about we need to initiate the relationship because the truth is God is everywhere. God is all that is. God is everywhere and some places and all the places in between. But when you can be willing to receive and start that relationship and just be willing to hear, that is what's going to start it. Because even before my whole healing journey and my daughter and all this, I realized I was always a skeptic of God. Like I thought God didn't exist. Like, haha, that's so silly. Sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't. But what really started for me was when I started my teaching career about, a decade ago now. My first teaching position was at a Lutheran school. And I had to teach a religious class about the Bible, or whatever it is. I forgot. But the stories and things like that. And I thought, oh my gosh, I felt like such an imposter. Like, how can I teach the children about this? I don't even believe this stuff. And what I learned from the children, like some of them had such deep faith and belief. And I get chills just thinking about God and, love and all that stuff and Jesus. And I just thought, okay, I'm going to be open to learning because I'm always a learner. I'm, a perpetual learner and student, even though I'm also a teacher and leader. And I learned so much from the kids. And there were some things I agreed with, some things I didn't. But what was happening was, I would attend chapel with them. I would sing the songs because that was like my favorite part, singing the music. And there's just such beautiful messages in there that can't be denied, and feelings that you feel that cannot be denied. And that was really an entry point into divine and into accessing that feeling. And what was happening was I started talking to God in the car on the way to work because I had an hour and a half commute both ways at the time. And I would just say, God, if you are there, like this and that. And I would just start with gratitude because I was already, I was reading Eckhart Tolle and Deepak Chopra and all these things and learning about how I could help myself and heal myself. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to practice gratitude and I'm going to thank God for all the things. And then it just turned into conversations and this, and then, synchronicities and signs and all the things. And then again, it's just a relationship that you build, that you cultivate, that grows to the point where it just became undeniable that God is listening, that God's there. And again, it's not for me to prove to people like, see, God did this and this and this and that. It was for me. It was just for me. And I would encourage people if they really want to know the truth. I've always been a seeker of truth. Is seek it for yourself. Seek it for yourself, not in a book, not in words. Yes, we like those, but in your own experience and have your own revelation of experiencing the divine.
I like when you said start with gratitude. That's something I try to practice in my day-to-day as well. But besides that, what's one spiritual practice you believe everyone should try at least once?
Yeah, that gratitude is definitely up there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just listening to your intuition, which is really your soul speaking to God, source,
Mm-hmm.
and practice taking action on it because we can hear, we can feel, we can do all the things, but until we take action on it, there's still some aspect of us that doesn't believe or have the faith. And with each action and step, trust. How do you believe and trust in something that you can't even see but you can feel and and it really begins with your own trust for yourself. So let alone trust in God and faith in God, what about the trust that you have in you, in who you are, in your own self? So I would say practice trusting yourself more and learning about who you are and who you truly are, because that naturally will lead to finding God.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. Thank you for that. And I have so many more questions, but I don't want to keep you. I just have one last question for you. What's next for the Purifying Place, and how do you envision expanding your mission?
Yeah, that's so interesting. I love that because I'm all about expansion. But so the next thing for me is I am currently writing a book about what has happened. It's a spiritual memoir, but also self-help. There's going to be guidance portions to it too. So it kind of illustrates the path that I've been on and that I've walked and what I've learned, the wisdoms I learned along the way, paired with how does that apply to the reader's own life, your own life as you're reading this story and as you relate it to your own path, your own journey. And there's going to be some reflections and things like that in there that help people. So I'm working on that. And also I'm also working on a course or a program that is, because right now I work one-to-one with clients, but I really want to reach more people. And I thought, well, how can I then translate what I do into something where people can do it on their own, where people can then gain the knowledge, gain the information? Because again, we want to empower others. So how can we then give that to people so they can start and begin their own path? And then I will just help as a facilitator guide as I already do. And the last thing is I've been connecting with, a research student at University of Edinburgh, which is in the UK, about possibly doing research on, some of the things that I do with my clients and how and what does that look like, this, backing it scientifically
Mhm.
with data, which I think is fascinating. And again, I'm not the strongest in explaining the science behind it. I know it's there because I've read it, but I don't have all the things like memorized. So I think it's just another way to, again, not to prove to anyone, because again, I believe this stuff works. I know it works. I've seen it work, just to have more language and different ways of explaining what we're experiencing and
Mhm.
deepen that wisdom and that knowledge.
Wow, I'm very excited for your journey. I'm really excited for your book. Thank you so much, Rosalie. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners or our viewers? Perhaps you'd like to tell them more about your services, anything at all.
Yeah, I mean, I just thank you so much for having me. This is just a pleasure to talk to you and share my experience. So thank you for having me. But no, yeah, you can find me at the Purifying Place on Instagram and just reach out if you have any questions or need guidance. But I really just hope that anything I do or, things like this just inspires people to take action on their own dreams and their own calling.
Thank you so much, Rosalie, for taking the time to grace our podcast and sharing your wisdom with our listeners. And of course, thank you everyone who listened to us today. This has been your host, Patricia. And remember, for all your professional, business, and technical writing needs, there's only one way to go, and that's with the right direction. See you guys soon. Goodbye.